Welcome back. Now for Talk Media News, made possible by our sponsor, Beth Ernest and Associates Real Estate. Beth Ernest's team of real estate brokers have been serving the Portland area for over 22 years, specializing in residential real estate, lots, and land. More at bethernest.com. We're pleased to welcome Tom Squitieri from Talk Media News, talkmedianews.com. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning. That was really great music that led in. That was really nice.
You like that? Just for you, Tom.
Who was performing that?
Us, just now. We just put our instruments down.
Nice job.
I actually don't know. You know what? I'll ask our producers, and I'll get back to you at the end of the segment.
Yeah, that would be great. That was really nice.
Yeah.
I could use that in the car when I'm driving around here.
Yeah, we call that our news is tough, so the music is calm music.
Oh, it looks like it was.
Well, that works for me. Yeah, that works for me.
That's Pete Rock. Song is A Little Soul. So you need a little soul in your life, Tom.
A little soul this Friday morning.
Indeed it is. So how's everything on the West Coast?
So far, so good. I mean, you know, it's only 7:19 a.m., but so far the news is slow.
We're talking about that Trump-Kim summit.
Uh-huh. Well, you know, it's very interesting on that. And I think I mentioned this on the show earlier this week in advance of the summit, probably Tuesday. What's always tricky about a summit that happens quickly with very little prep work is that you have muddled messages and muddled expectations. And I'm putting a positive sheen on this, and I believe that is certainly what happened in Hanoi, that while there was communication and somewhat agreement on lower levels of the diplomatic ranks on what could be accomplished in this, it wasn't translated up the food chain, no pun intended. And when it was just President Trump and Chairman Kim alone in the room with translators, there was a miscommunication, and thus you had no agreement. Oftentimes, before summits, agreements are already finalized.
Right,
so all
right.
They have to do is essentially sign it and make nice statements. And I'm not saying that in a dismissive way.
No, it's
the way it needs to be
public,
done, so you avoid this kind of miscommunication.
It's a very interesting point. So much for making a deal on the spot, huh?
You know, you guys may know by now that, among other things, I'm somewhat of a history nerd. I really do enjoy history. And I immediately thought, when I heard about this, what happened yesterday, I thought back to when President Reagan met Mikhail Gorbachev in Reykjavik, Iceland. The two had met a year before and got along quite well, and they did continue to get along quite well, as we have seen. And they met for a summit that had about a 10-day advance with no agenda, and the two of them got along so well, they were making all these amazing agreements, and it both thrilled and panicked their aides on both sides because there was no pre-work done. And it fell apart at the very end over Star Wars, which was the missile defense system. So there was no agreement. Reagan left and Gorbachev left. But they continued to talk, and eventually there were some arms control agreements down the road. Now, I am not for one moment suggesting that Trump and Kim are like Reagan and Gorbachev. They're four different individuals, different circumstances, different issues on the table.
Sure.
I say that only that there seems to be some positive mentions in the North Korean press today about the good relationship that still exists between Trump and Kim. If indeed that is the case, that could keep the door open to future talks, the revisiting of the idea of removing some sanctions in return for some freezing of militarization, which was what appears to have been what the North Koreans thought was going to happen, and indeed what some people in the State Department thought was going to happen. So if that's still alive, then that could happen down the road. So be it.
Do you believe that to be true, just sort of like as a gut feeling that there still are good relations between Trump and Kim Jong-un? Or does that seem like saving face?
Yeah, my gut feeling is that the two of them have some kind of connection, okay? I've never met Kim, obviously, and I didn't cover it in the summits, so I don't know this. You know, I don't have a gut feeling based on his body language. I have met President Trump, and I think that Trump certainly believes there is a good connection, and that's sort of 90% of the genie right there. You know, that President Trump is exuding this to Chairman Kim, and Kim feels this, my word, warmth and confidence, and he reciprocates in his own way. So this is speculation on my part.
Sure.
You say my gut feeling.
Well, that's what I asked you to do. So
I do. Oh, no, I do, because there was no hostile words other than the immediate North Koreans say, "Hey, the United States shouldn't blame us for this because this is what we wanted," and that, that's fair. If that's accurate, it's fair. But it wasn't said in hostility. It wasn't like we're throwing. We had this lunch set and we didn't have it, and we stormed out in a huff. Neither side did that, and so I'm a pragmatic optimist. In the sense that I try to read the tea leaves from afar, and these tea leaves suggest that there is a possibility. Now, Kim's very mercurial. President Trump can be mercurial in his own way. Who knows what next week will bring in anything, let alone this relationship. Remember one other thing, if I may suggest, that the South Koreans who were not at the summit, who were greatly concerned that Trump may give something away, they've been working with the North Koreans on normalizing relations between those two countries. Mm-hmm. That's going to continue, and that helps in the larger U.S.-North Korea dance.
Sure. Can I ask you kind of a out of left field question?
I used to play left field.
Perfect. Well, then it's perfect. That's funny. I was just thinking, why did I not say right field? But I just knew in my heart that you played left field.
You did know me. You guys got me pegged.
Yeah, that's what we do here. How are diplomatic relations between North Korea and Russia, and how does that play into relations between North Korea and the U.S.?
Well, that's interesting you bring that up, because there was a report out earlier this week. It kind of came and went because of all the other news that the U.S., I'm presuming the State Department, had asked the Russians for some suggestions on how to deal with the North Koreans in the summit. And that the foreign minister of Russia, Mr. Lavrov, was supposedly going to fly to Hanoi to sort of give counsel. I never followed up on that story. I had other things to do. I found it very interesting. So in regards to what you just asked, it would suggest to me that at least the Americans believe that the Russians and the North Koreans get along pretty well, or at least have gotten along well enough that the Russians could offer some insights on how to deal with Kim and the North Koreans. Generally speaking, they get along pretty well with Moscow. China is their big, protector and their big boss. Mm-hmm. Speaking of North Korea now, but Russia, has always had a hand in North Korea activities. Sure, they're pretty close to the borders are pretty close. People forget about Vladivostok coming down and all that. So they have a vested interest in it as well. If you have a nuclear explosion in North Korea, it's going to impact southeastern Russia way off there, in the Sea of Japan.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, I think we forget that all these countries are so close, both geographically and politically.
Russia just, of course, is immense geographically.
Right, Russia's close to everything. In fact, I can see it from my house.
Like 8 time zones or something, incredible like that. And it kind of loops around China a little bit. And geography is important when you look at a map and see how close those countries are. Japan, Russia, China, the Koreas, etc. Yeah, interesting. Well, we'll definitely have to keep an eye on this story, because I feel like there are a lot of moving parts, and it's probably a lot more complicated than we're seeing right now. Yeah, and you know what? If you have the opportunity to look at, and I could email you if you wish, what the State Department sent out to the press overnight on the plane right back. I'll be happy to email. Do you guys get those emails I send, by the way? I'm sure our producers do, yes. Yeah, I can email you that, because it's very fascinating to read the State Department analysis. Yeah, please do. The talks, And going back to what we were saying a few moments ago, is that if North Korea wanted some sanctions relief, and the United States wanted some type of freeze on activity, that's a good starting point. Sure. For negotiations. So it shows that both sides are willing to compromise, which is important in any human relations, I would say. But I'm not president. Exactly. So. Not again to be pragmatically optimistic. That might be a point for such optimism. Sure, right. Well, Tom Squitieri, we've got a few more minutes. Should we talk about Congress? Should we talk about the Pentagon? Your choice. Well, let me just talk about how reporters are not always autotrons. So yesterday, this is a Pentagon story. So yesterday,
I knew it.
Yesterday, President Trump, he stopped on the way back from Hanoi to refuel in Alaska, the Almendorf Air Force Base, and he spoke to the troops, which was great. I mean, that's a great thing for any commander-in-chief to do. Troops in Alaska, are far away, they feel, and he was well received, and President Trump is very good at these kind of events, and I say that sincerely. And then, having covered the military for a long time, I know it meant a lot to those folks. And during his remarks, which are extemporaneous generally, he said how ISIS is now defeated 100% on the ground in Syria. And of course, all of us at the Pentagon, we just sort of went right into the press room and went to,
like, here it goes.
To deal with CENTRICOM and say, is this true? And even before we got there, the one press officer who deals with us he whisked himself away into one of the secure rooms, and they were calling, Central Command in Iraq and Syria. Is this true? What's going on? What do we tell reporters? I know you guys like this inside Pentagon stuff. You told me that on Tuesday, so I'll just another example. And so they're in a secure room, trying to figure out what to say. And when they came out, the only thing that they could say was, you'll have to ask the White House for further information.
Oh,
now,
no. That's like when you ask your dad and he says, well, you've got to ask your mom, and you know that both of them are not telling the truth.
Exactly. And it's better than the example, improving that example. In the old days when dads controlled the keys of the car, if you go to your dad and say, can I have the keys of the car? And your dad then says, well, you just said, ask your mom. Well, your mom doesn't have the keys.
Right.
So that's a non-answer answer, And so the Pentagon should be able to tell you whether fighting is over on the ground in eastern Syria with our allies in this small area that ISIS still holds on the ground. It's a logical question, a fair question to ask the Pentagon.
And a question just about facts. It's not like an opinion question.
Yeah, it's not an opinion question. It's a yes or no. Or it could be, you know what, we think we are, but there's still, whatever. But it's a question that's not an opinion question. You either have captured the city, you haven't, or you're almost about to.
Right.
Or call me in 2 hours and I'll have a better answer for you.
Right. Yeah.
They deferred it back to the White House, and the reason is one person told me later, off the record, but I'll share it to you. This individual says, I'm going to paraphrase, they're very timid because they know that one tweet means they can lose their jobs.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
But that's sad.
No, I mean, absolutely. But it just, it plays into this bigger issue of we live in a post-truth era at the moment. And I don't know, everything's topsy-turvy. The truth is not going to set you free in this particular political climate.
No.
Tom Squitieri, we're just about out of time. Thank you so much for being here. Your insight is really valuable to us.
Have a great weekend.
Yeah, you as well. You as well. Bye, Tom.
Bye.
That was Talk Media News, brought to you by Beth Ernest and Associates Real Estate. Lots of land at bethernest.com. We're going to take a quick break, and then, if you can believe it, we're going to talk about more news. We got some big stories coming up. Stick around with us. I'm Kira. That's Hannah over there.
Hello.
Hello. We'll be right back. This is XRAY Radio is yours.